Works. Does it work? It works. Okay. Gotta hold it really close. All right. All right. Okay. Um, my name is Ken Smith. I'm the visitation pastor at Midvale Community Lutheran Church, and I'm introducing today the Mennonite group on Peace Fellowship. And the reason I'm doing that, I'm starting early, just a few seconds, because I wanted to say a couple things. Um, I Denny Weaver and I've gotten to know each other through David and Rhoda Braunschweig. He lives out at Oakwood University Woods, where they do, and uh, David introduced us, and Denny and I become well. Friend is a complicated word, but we actually meet with some regularity, and we
it.
are quite sympathetic to each other's positions. Hold my mic up close. Okay. Thanks, Brooke. Okay. Um, so, but then Denny, you may know, some of you, because he was a presenter at our Bible school this past summer. He worked on nonviolent atonement theory in the New Testament, and some of you may have been to that session and got some sense of where he is coming from there. He uh, he is a retired professor from Bluffton College, or is it a university now?
It's a complicated story. It's going back to
That too is a
college.
complicated story. Okay,
It was university when I
a
was
Mennonite school, and so he's been in theology for quite a long time. We decided a while ago that Palestine was an important issue for Adult Forum, and so um, today we decided we would try to pull together the Mennonite Action for Peace with Denny Weaver and Stephanie Ramer and Mark Bauman. The Mennonite faith tradition emphasizes the values of peace, justice, community, and mutual aid, and serves as foundations then for their active faith. Grounded in tradition, Mennonite Action is a movement including Mennonites, Anabaptists, and others bonded by a common belief that we have a responsibility to use our voices powerfully as possible for the cause of peace and justice. In our current climate, this includes creative nonviolent actions to demand ceasefire, which may be taking place now, end the U.S. and Western funded occupation of Palestine, and build for a lasting peace. Denny and Stephanie and Mark will be here now to share the foundations of the Mennonites as a peace church and their history of support for Palestinians. And Denny, I think you're starting.
As Ken said, you hear me? Okay, good. As Ken said, I talked in this very room last summer and I enjoyed being here and I'm glad for this opportunity and I think I will be here again this coming summer. And today I'm just going to start with a few words about put Mennonites on the map and then briefly explain how we got into Palestine. Uh, we are actually 2 days away from the origin of Mennonites. The movement began when young people in Zurich, studying the Bible published in Greek by Erasmus, became convinced that the New Testament called for baptism of adults. And when their leaders, their church and political leaders, refused to enact reform, on the evening of January 21, 1525, a handful of those young people met and performed the first adult baptisms. And this audacious action is the beginning, we say, is the beginning of the Anabaptist movement. And today there are Anabaptists on all inhabited continents. Since these folks had all been baptized as adults, baptism as adults was considered by the authorities as unnecessary rebaptism. And Anabaptist, are Greek words that mean rebaptism. The early years of the Anabaptist movement were tumultuous. Rebaptism was quickly declared illegal. Since the church was established, violation of a church edict was also a civil offense. So across Europe, there were several thousand Anabaptists executed by burning at the stake or drowning. More than a decade after that first act of rebaptism, ex-Catholic priest Menno Simons joined the movement. And because he traveled widely, speaking to Anabaptists from Netherlands all the way over into what's today Poland, Anabaptists picked up his name Menno, and today we're Mennonites. Mennonites in North America are descended from immigrants from two major regions of Europe. Refugees from harsh treatment in Switzerland moved down the Rhine into Alsace in southern Germany and what today's France. And from there, they were part of the German immigration to North America beginning in the 18th century. And they settled big chunks of them in Pennsylvania. And then as the frontier moved west, they moved with the frontier into Ohio and Indiana, Illinois, and a few as far as Kansas, and also down south, down the Shenandoah Valley into Virginia. And I am a descendant of those immigrants. Already in the 1530s and 40s, Anabaptists from the area of Netherlands sought refuge in more tolerant Prussian territory in the region of today's Poland. As political factors closed in on them, in the 17th century, they were part of the German migration that accepted the invitation of Catherine the Great to settle in Russia, what's today Ukraine. A number of new Lutherans made that same move. And when the Tsar started to place restrictions on Mennonites in the late 19th century, large numbers immigrated to the United States and Canada. They settled, big chunks of them settled in Kansas and Manitoba. Another large contingent made that same move after the Russian Revolution. A primary commitment for all these folks was pacifism. In Europe and Russia, they learned to survive by just keeping their heads down. And they became known as the quiet in the land. They brought that quiet in the land mentality with them to North America. When they became involved in society, it was in helping roles, dealing with people that were suffering or in need. The first organized activity, where more than one group got together, the first organized activity was to help the Mennonites in Russia who had suffered severely at the hands of the revolutionaries after the revolution. Their crops and food stores and farm animals were all taken by the revolutionaries, and these folks were actually starving. And several Mennonite groups in North America organized what was called Mennonite Central Committee to send foodstuffs and tractors to their co-religionists back in Russia. And incidentally, my middle daughter married a man whose grandfather's family received one of those tractors that Mennonite Central Committee sent to Russia. Now, Mennonite Central Committee, we usually just say MCC, soon developed into a relief and service organization for causes beyond Mennonites. Within 2 years of the formation of the State of Israel in 1948, MCC was involved with Palestinian refugees. MCC's idea was not to be involved in politics, just help whoever's in need, regardless of their politics. But Palestinians were clearly people in need. And so this stance more or less characterized Mennonite approaches everywhere, but particularly with Palestinians. although working with Palestinians did reveal the reality of the Palestinian situation. About 10 or 15 years ago, Mennonite was formed. It's an organization of Palestinians who in this country who are Mennonites to advocate for Palestine among the largest Mennonite denominations. And that brings us to Mennonite Action, which was formed just in the last 2 years as the first group to advocate for Palestinians beyond the Mennonite world. And that brings us to Stephanie, who's going to talk about formation of Mennonite Action.
Good morning. Is this close enough? Okay. So as Denny said, Mennonite Action was formed in November 2023 in response to the bombardment of Gaza following the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel. Adam, my oldest son, is a political organizer. He had worked for Ilhan Omar in Minneapolis for a couple years before moving to New York City. And he had just started a job on October 1st as the political director for Ro Khanna representative out of California. On October 7th, after the attack, Adam began urging the representative to call for a ceasefire along with the other progressive representatives. But when he declined to do this and would not do this, Adam quit his job. And so at this time, Adam was in New York, and he began attending a number of the protests in both New York and DC, mostly spearheaded by Jewish Voice for Peace and If Not Now. And Adam became very active in these, and it was during these protests that he began looking around and saying, where is the Christian voice? Where are the Christians? Where is the Mennonite voice speaking out for peace? And so it was, as he reflected back on throughout his years of organizing, he had met a number of other Mennonite organizers who had come from Mennonite backgrounds or had family who were Mennonite. And at one of the protests, he ran into one of his organizing friends and mused aloud, you know, what if we took what we know about organizing and used it to mobilize the Mennonites to speak out for peace? And so that's really how Mennonite Action was born. Adam and Nick, several Mennonite clergy, and other Mennonite organizers gathered together, began brainstorming what this organization could look like. They built a website using lyrics from an Anabaptist hymn, words written by Menno Simons. The hymn is called "We Are People of God's Peace." And on their website, you will see lyrics from this hymn helping to shape what their mission and their goal and their guiding principles, the foundation coming from this Anabaptist hymn. They set up a Slack channel, which is a chat, online chat forum type of thing where you can set up subgroups or little channels, and it really was a way to bring Mennonites from across North America, both the US and Canada, together in one space to talk together, introduce one another, share where they're from, share what actions they were taking or what ideas they had, and really be this community platform in a new way. And then they also scheduled a mass call, reaching out to Mennonite congregations across America and Canada. They hoped for 500 registrants, and what they ended up was a Zoom call of over 800 people who joined together. It was really something amazing to witness, and the chat on that Zoom call was everyone listing their name and their congregation and where they were from, and you know, it really touched something. People wanted to do something. So I really feel like Mennonite Action ignited a spark. The organizers assumed that the core audience might be a demographic like them, young 20 to 30 somethings who had drifted away from the church, but held closely to their Mennonite heritage and their Mennonite identity. What they found were a number of elders who were also there, elders who were putting things in the chat saying, I've worked for peace all my life and have often felt very alone. Elders coming up to Adam and Nick at in-person training sessions and saying, I'm so grateful to see the young people taking up the mantle of peace and leading us. So it's been very much a cross-generational organization and support. People are clearly grieving over Gaza and the ongoing Palestinian occupation, and Mennonite Action offered them actions to take as part of a beloved community. In that first mass call, there were prayers and singing. There were statements from clergy. There were speakers from Palestine who called in their very, very early morning hours to be a part of the call. And Mennonite Action laid out their mission for this new organization. They laid out their guiding principles that govern everything that they do. And they laid out their first mass action, which was scheduled for December 19th, 2023, which Mark is going to talk more about in a minute. And they had a toolkit with resources, and the thoughtfulness and the intentionality that shone through was clear that this is what professional organizers do. You know, they have the tools and the means to bring people together and have them act for a common cause. I now have a YouTube video that's going to give you a picture. You're going to see faces. You're going to see images of actions over the last 14 months, and hear from some of the people who have been involved as to what Mennonite Action means to them. And then we'll hear from Mark Bauman about some of our local actions and what our local group is doing.
I joined Mennonite Action because it was the best way I'd seen yet to deal with the anger and the grief around all I see happening to friends in Gaza and the West Bank. Action with my community towards a ceasefire is certainly more productive than crying or raging while watching the news or doom scrolling on Instagram.
It's time to take this movement to DC, to the place where our representatives are making decisions in our names, to the place where our representatives are deciding to turn our tax dollars into weapons of war.
A call for us who are traditionally the quiet in the land to raise our voices for a ceasefire in Gaza.
I'm a Palestinian American Christian. Killing civilians and children, I want Representative Tucker to know that that's not helpful in bringing about a peace.
Yeah, and we are ready to welcome you to Harrisonburg. However many of you would like to come and join us for the start of this march.
The reason why we were pulling everyone together was specifically to protest Christians United for Israel and their influence on U.S. policy, because very few people recognize that the largest pro-Israel and anti-Palestinian organization in the U.S. is actually a Christian one, and most of the people who are pushing the U.S. to support this genocide against Palestinians are actually Christians. So it seems that Christians have a particular responsibility to respond to.
When I started drinking warm water to help me lose weight, my friends laughed at me.
Make no advocacy about warm water drinking or not.
Can you hear me? No? Ah, there. There we go. Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you, Stephanie and Denny. So yeah, here in Madison, Stephanie and Denny and others from our own Madison Mennonite Church, we participated in these mass calls with the Mennonite Action National, and we started talking about how we could form our own local chapter here in Madison. The first day of action was December 19th, 2023, that Stephanie referenced earlier. We decided we would target Senator Tammy Baldwin's office that day. Mark Pocan seemed to be sympathetic to some of our requests already, and we felt we didn't have a lot of sway over Ron Johnson. So we targeted Senator Baldwin. And there were a lot of people that, I don't know if you've been there on the 8th floor of where her office is, but it's a pretty small vestibule area, and we had that very full with mostly folks from our church, but also some from the Quaker Friends. And we were there to, well, it was a program with singing and some readings and several personal reflections as well. And we didn't meet with the senator in person, but with her staff, and we urged for three things: an immediate ceasefire, and for her support for no more military weapons to Israel as long as the death and destruction continues in Gaza. And then the third thing was that Israel allow trucks to come through the border, delivering urgently needed humanitarian supplies to the people of Gaza, including food, water, medical supplies. So that action was held on December 19th of 2023. That was one part of a nationwide day of action. And then following that, we had our second day of action on March 26th. And that was also organized by Mennonite Action at the national level, and we had our own local action, again, at Senator Baldwin's office. For that day of action, we had, there's something called MCC relief kits. Denny had referenced MCC earlier, the Mennonite Central Committee, which is like the relief and development arm of the Mennonite Church. And a lot of places where they work may have experienced a very recent disaster, and relief kits are a way of connecting people, Mennonites in North America, with some of the work of MCC and other countries. The relief kits that we had brought included things like bath soap, laundry soap, and toothbrushes. And so we held that up at Senator Baldwin's office to demonstrate the lack of sanitation, clean water, shelter in Gaza. And then other items from the relief kits, such as sanitary napkins for women. We held that up to talk about the violence inflicted by Israel on Palestinian women, newborns, infants, and children. So it was a visual demonstration of some of the horrible things that people in Gaza were going through. And again, we were urging the senator to support immediate ceasefire, no more military weapons from U.S. To support the destruction and death and to allow trucks delivering humanitarian aid to cross into Gaza. We actually formally opened our own local chapter of Madison Mennonite Action on June 23rd of last year. And that meeting was attended by, I think, about 8 or 9 people. And we decided for our monthly meetings that we needed to be a little more ecumenical about this. And so we also invited folks to join us from the United Church of Christ that we share with Orchard Ridge, and from the Friends meeting, and one woman from the Catholic tradition. So we currently have, I think, about 15 people that are part of our group, our Madison chapter of Mennonite Action. And we meet monthly. A lot of the focus of these meetings is to highlight what events that are going on in the Madison area that we can participate in, and kind of brainstorm about ways that we might help to shape the narrative on what's going on in Gaza. And we decided that one way to shape the narrative is through opinion pieces, to letters to the editor of the Wisconsin State Journal and Cap Times. Denny is a frequent contributor to letters to the editor. He gets items published probably on a monthly basis, or more frequently maybe. So that has been a focus as well. Our most recent action of Mennonite Action that we sponsored was held on December 21st. It was the Interfaith Longest Night Gaza Vigil. We held that in a very public area on Monroe Street, right by Trader Joe's. A lot of pedestrian traffic, Christmas shoppers. We also invited the media to come and cover the event. We had, it truly was an interfaith gathering. We had speakers from different faith traditions, including a Muslim speaker, Jewish speaker. Denny represented the Mennonites, and we also had Jeff Wild, Pastor Jeff Wild, there with his really moving Christ in the Rubble presentation, turning swords into plowshares kind of idea. So gun stocks had been used to make this Christ in the Rubble manger scene. So yeah, I guess that's all I had to say, and we can have some questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I really appreciate this presentation and the enthusiasm you have for what you're talking about. And I hear I hear a history from the Mennonite Church of being engaged within the life of the world, and trying to, and taking action, and, and helping and supporting situations. And I'm trying to think, is there a nuance in this particular thing where you've kind of done something a little bit different in terms of like some type of an advocacy, that a role that maybe hasn't been a strong part of the Mennonite tradition in a different way? And so that's what I felt like there was like a sort of a launching off into yet another, strong voice in the world. And I'm just trying to understand if I'm picking up on that nuance.
No, I think you're right. I spent 40 years, working on theology that kind of pushed advocacy. And this is the first movement that to me has really run with that. And I think it is a new epoch. There have always been people who were advocates, but this is the first movement by Mennonites or structure by Mennonites that whose purpose is advocacy. It feels like that to me.
So it's the first time the denomination has
Yeah.
taken a stand and is organizing something.
And we still can't say it didn't come from our executive director.
Looks like it
but
came from her son.
but those people, but the denomination is willing to own this
Okay.
and talk about it. They're not saying, well, that's not us anymore.
Right.
It speaks for us. So
Yeah. I mean, that seems like
this is a new I think this is a new epoch.
that's, I mean, it felt like it was groundbreaking, or I mean, a big sort of not, I don't want to say seismic shift, but I mean, it was an important thing. And I was like, I just wanted to make sure I was really understanding that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That seems, yeah, I think that's exciting. Oh,
Anyone else?
Thanks for this presentation. Can you give us a sense of how large the Mennonite community is in Madison and maybe nationally?
I heard the other day we average 75 people on Sunday morning, and it depends on who counts nationally. If you see in the Anabaptist world, the Old Order Amish count too. So if you go, we're probably on the left fringe, and the Old Order Amish is on the right fringe. And if you put everybody in the middle, I mean, if that whole spectrum is a million or a little more than a million, and our folks over here, well, our denomination is, I don't know, 80,000. And there's another contingent that's that big that looks like us but is anti-gay. And so like everybody else, we've had that argument. So the culturally progressive is close to half of the contingent. But we've got the culturally progressive have got their own arguments. I don't know.
So I will add, there's one Mennonite congregation in Madison. There's a Mennonite congregation in Milwaukee, and a few of those members came over and joined us for our December 19th action last year. Mennonite Action nationally, some of the areas where they're working are areas where there's numerous Mennonite churches. And one of the interesting things, which is also somewhat of a shift, is how this has brought multiple congregations in the same area. So maybe Harrisonburg, Pennsylvania, where there's a number of Mennonite churches, the congregations coming together, working together on joint actions, having potlucks and evening art sessions to make banners, to sing together, to raise funds for Gaza. And so that's also been something that's really exciting to observe. We don't have that in Madison because it's just us, which is also why we felt it was also important for ourselves to coordinate and build relationship with groups around us who are also, like-minded or working towards some of the same goals. So the Quaker group, and like Mark said, we share space with the Orchard Ridge United Church of Christ building. So having them join us as well.
Yeah, and then June 22nd of last year, there was a large, I think it was an interfaith gathering in Chicago calling for support for the people of Gaza. And I think that was sponsored by Mennonite Action Chicago. And there were several of us from the Madison Mennonite Church, and I think also from Milwaukee, that attended that event. Yeah.
I have two questions. One is, I understand there were some arrests made at one of the gatherings. And I would like to know more about civil disobedience and what happens when you get arrested, and the process that takes place. My second question is, I have such deep regard for your commitment to peace, and why are Lutherans so quiet? I'd like to hear your reaction to that question.
I can speak to the first maybe, and Denny do the second, or others want to jump in. In terms of the civil disobedience, so there were arrests in January. There was a national action at the Capitol building, the Cannon building. That was the picture you saw, where a number of people sitting in the middle of the rotunda singing, and there were, I believe, over 150 Mennonites got arrested that day. Someone from our church who now lives in Baltimore, but was a part of that and was so excited to be arrested. So what happens with that at the Cannon building? There are protests and arrests every day. It's pretty rote, and so with that particular action, they put their song leaders in the middle and had everyone else sitting around them. The Capitol Police went for the song leaders first. They walked right into the middle, arrested them. One of the Mennonite traditions is singing, and four-part harmony singing is a part of our tradition. And so even though they took our song leaders, everyone kept singing. And you can find on YouTube and social media, video of that event, and it's really quite moving, even as everyone was standing around with their hands cuffed or zip tied behind their back, and there was only one or two left in the middle. The singing kept going. A side note, I will also say, in a number of these, you saw a number of the visuals that are used. If you look at the website, also really pulling on tradition. So not only the words from Menno Simons from a hymn from the 1500s, but also the quilts that have long been a Mennonite tradition, cultural tradition. And so many of the banners and visuals looked like quilts. And so you also saw that. And then at the there was a march from Harrisonburg to DC, which happened in July. That was also on the video, and that culminated again in some action that led to arrests. And so similar. So with those arrests, they're pretty routine. The police arrest, you get hauled away in vans, taken to a processing place. The organizers knew, people needed to have, I think, $50 with them to pay the fine. It's just seen as like a parking ticket, maybe, type of offense. So we're taken to a place and processed. One funny side note from the January arrests, there's a lot of common Mennonite surnames. So Yoder, Miller, different names. And so when the police were processing the arrest, they were a little puzzled by why people had the same names, and they were getting a little, wait, what? So that was just kind of a funny little side note. I hope that answered some of your question about the civil disobedience. The second question, could you repeat it? Oh, yeah.
From your perspective, why are Lutherans so quiet about advocating and promoting peace?
I don't think we need to, I don't think we will touch that. I don't think we want to speak for you guys. I could just say, it's people, we want to be part of the movement. My grandson was in Washington, and he is a song leader, but he was assigned, there was the contingent in that rotunda. And I wondered, I watched that, and I wondered if my grandson was in there. Well, he was assigned to be a song leader for the group that was outside. And so on another video, I saw him walking up and down leading this group. And then he drove he drove those people. His responsibility was to go pick up the people after they'd been processed and pay their $50. And so, we've got our family connections in this kind of stuff. I was really proud that I was there. My grandson was there.
Thank you very much for being here. I came in late because I was talking upstairs. But as I'm sitting here, are Moravians involved in any of this movement? And what about the Wisconsin Council of Churches here in Wisconsin? Are they involved? Is there any connection with that? And I guess I would tag on Jeff's, where are the Lutherans? I mean, I know where we are here in terms of understanding more about Palestine and Pastor Blake's involvement and some of the other members. So that's kind of a general. Thank you.
We don't have official connections with Moravians, but if a Moravian wanted to come along, they're welcome. Everybody's welcome. In terms of the Wisconsin Council of Churches, again, we don't have a specific link with them. I'm sure they would be sympathetic. I was a member of the Wisconsin Council of Churches Peace and Justice Commission for 7 years. Now, since COVID, and I know that it's all changed around and reorganized, so I don't even know what the Peace and Justice Commission looks like now. But again, I would expect the Wisconsin Council to be sympathetic. I mean, we're not very old, so there's other contacts that we could make, conversations that we could have at some point. We're still finding our way.
I will say we have had someone from our congregation is a part of a group called the Interfaith Peace Working Group.
Yeah,
Working
right.
Peace Group.
Yeah.
And that is ecumenical, made up of persons from a number of different faith backgrounds. And so there is someone from that group who is also a part of our Mennonite Action Madison group. So we have that tie-in. We have connections with World Beyond War, which is not a faith-based group, but another peace organization. So I really see part of what our work has been is building these relationships, finding like-minded folks. I wasn't aware that the Orchard Ridge group had this Palestine Justice group. And so having someone from that group join our group has been a great way to, again, make each other aware of what's going on around town, what we can support or sponsor, as well as having others that we can tell about things that we want to do, actions that we want to take, and try to get more numbers out there for action.
And I really appreciate the event that was held here at your church when, was it Mitri Rahab? Yeah, spoke a couple of months ago, or I can't remember when, in the fall. Is that in the fall? Yeah. My wife and I went to hear the two young activists speak, Osama Iliwat and Rotem Levine. I don't know if any of you saw them. They spoke at the Christ Presbyterian Church on East Gorham, and then the following day at the Crossing, which I think is a Lutheran-run place, right? Or not? The Crossing, 1128 University Avenue? No? Okay. Oh, it's Methodist. Okay, well. Okay. But yeah, there are a lot of both religious-based interfaith groups, but also secular groups in the Madison area that we've tried to connect with, including the Interfaith Peace Working Group, the Wisconsin Coalition for Justice in Palestine, Madison Veterans for Peace, Jewish Voice for Peace, and Madison for a World Beyond War, and the Madison Rafa Sister City Project are some of the organizations here in the Madison area.
Okay. Oh, okay. I have the microphone. So, all right. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, I think people know this, but I just want to say it out loud that the ELCA does have a strong voice in terms of advocacy. And I mean, it has had it has a history. We have people who are at the United Nations doing advocacy work. We have an office in Washington, D.C., where advocacy work is being done. And one of the initiatives that has historically and continues to be an initiative is the ELCA speaks out on the issue of peace in the Middle East. And so it used to be called Peace Not Walls. It was just renamed SUAD. I think that's how you pronounce okay. So I mean, that's clearly something that that the ELCA does. And if you want to get a packet of information about it, you can just go to the ELCA website and you can download it, an action kit. So I mean, we do things. So I mean, I don't want people to walk away thinking, oh my God, this denomination does nothing. You know, there really has been things that have been done by the ELCA, and there we also have state offices where advocacy is being done on this issue, and and encouraging congregations and individuals to reach out. Now, that's not to say we couldn't do more, or is our presence, the type of presence people want. Maybe somebody likes, feels that protest is more effective, but I think, like our bishops, our presiding bishops, typically whenever there is some type of political activity, letters are drafted. I remember when this has been over a decade, so this isn't something that's happened recently, but I remember when I worked at the national office in the Division for Global Mission, when something would happen related to a crisis in the Middle East, the director for that unit was automatically, the related staff drafted a letter that went from our director to the presiding bishop, and then it was given, sent to the president. So, I mean, there was a lot of, of that type of advocacy that just happens on a routine basis, and people in congregations don't even know that it's happening. But there is a real, effort to have the voice of the Lutheran Church be a part of political decision making. I mean, if the manufacturers of guns can advocate, why in the heck can't Christians? And so, I mean, I really want, I'm on board saying we could do more, but I just want people to be aware that we certainly are, as a denomination, doing something. And hopefully, our denomination and your denomination and all these others that you have mentioned, we can just keep, raising that voice up, because we need it in this day and age, and maybe after next week even more.
I really want to thank you for your presence with us today and for the work that you've been about doing. I have a couple questions. The first is, how can we better work together? Because I really think that our voices matter, but sometimes we just need each other to have a presence out in the world. And I also wonder if your presence at Tammy Baldwin's offices each year have moved the needle a little bit. I mean, has she become an advocate for peace in Gaza and for the Palestinian people?
Well, you never know. She put out a statement of some kind that you could read it as a little movement, but you really, I don't know. I mean, I end up saying, well, maybe. But I also think every little bit helps, because people in those offices are aware of public opinion. And even if they don't move right now, when these little voices keep coming, and those people whose office depends on surviving on public opinion, and they start to, well, there's starting to be a lot of people talk about that, maybe, so I think every letter, every voice, every comment somewhere helps.
Yeah, at one of our Mennonite Action Madison chapter monthly meetings, Denny pointed out that the staff for Tammy Baldwin, for Mark Pocan, for Ron Johnson even, they do look at the letters to the editor and the State Journal and the Cap Times and other papers to try and gauge public opinion. So that is one strategy that we can use to move that needle.
It was a Pocan staff person who told me letters don't change opinion, they reflect it. And so we all look for it. We all read those letters to see where opinion is going.
So I think that's a good challenge. Write your letters, get them out there, call the offices and express your views. But yeah, submitting editorials to the paper, it makes a difference. And I think having more faith voices come out in, we are presenting something different than the Christian nationalist opinion. And I think that's important if we are people of faith to speak out and what that faith means to us. And I think that's what we need more of.
I'm trying to get a handle on the role of vengeance in all of this. We all will agree, I think, that the attack by Hamas was horrific and it was wrong. But the response by Israel has been equally horrific and wrong. And is your goal just in the short term to alleviate suffering by the Palestinians? Or how do we approach the idea of eternal peace in the Mideast? Or is that not even possible?
No, I firmly believe, see, in 1948, or I don't know which a year or so, 750,000 Palestinians were simply pushed out, left dishes on the table, left clothes in their closets, just pushed out, dumped in refugee camps. Nothing has ever been done. I mean, so the UN and US and all kinds of people have built little houses for them places, but their peoplehood and the injustice of simply having their land taken from them has never been dealt with. And that is the frustration that Hamas feeds on. And until that wound in Palestinians is recognized and dealt with, there will never be peace. And so you can kill as many Hamas as they want. There'll always be people who are still angry because great-grandpa lost the land. So peace means, stopping vengeance back and forth. That doesn't get anywhere. You have to recognize that root cause. And there would be peace if they'd recognize that. But so far, Israel is not about to do that, and the U.S. doesn't push Israel to recognize that, and the U.S. is afraid to. The lobbyists keep the United States from working hard on that issue as well. Maybe you'd like to say it differently.
Well, I would, a little tangent on that. I would just like to say that I think it's very easy in this country to think everything is black and white. And I would like, and we didn't even talk about our vigils at the farmers market this summer and in engaging people there, working with the Quaker group on that. But I think what is so important for us to hold is the fact that we are complex beings and we can hold the grief of multiple people in our hearts at the same time. Because we are calling out for a ceasefire does not mean that we can't also recognize the horror of the October 7th attack. It doesn't minimize the grief and sorrow on one side to recognize the grief and sorrow on another side.
No, I actually think if the Israelis would do something for Palestinians, the Israelis would be safer as well, because it would undercut that frustration on the other side. So both people would be helped if Palestinians could be dealt with.
I would just like to respond a little bit to all of us doing this piecemeal, and I'm wondering what kinds of thinking have gone into bringing together, I don't mean necessarily physically, but all of the different Christian faiths, religions, and then making a move also on Washington. I mean, I'm not negating anything that anyone is doing. That's not where I'm coming from. But as I listen to you and all that you have done, and I think of other movements, the more organizations who are coming together and are presenting themselves, whether it's also in writing and petitions and the actually being there, like singing in the rotunda and so on. But one group here, one group there is good, but it's not good enough. At least I could see that in another movement, i.e. people with mental illness. If you appear, everybody from across the country, so to speak, that is much more than one group of us and another group of us and another group. That might still continue. I'm not saying it shouldn't. But how do we do that so that we also have the ELCA, the Roman Catholics, the Moravians, the Mennonites, all those that I don't even know about? Because we've got this strength of the Zionists and of the white Christian nationalists, and that's power. I mean, that is big power. And so we're going against that big power. And how do we go against it with all of us? I don't have the answer. And I'm not saying eliminate what we're doing, but this overarching, how do we do that? I don't know.
So there is an organization called Christians for a Free Palestine who kind of saw what Mennonite Action was doing and wanted to take that to other denominations as well. So I encourage you to take a look at their website and actions. They're also doing mass calls, kind of looking at that same question. How do we bring multiple faiths together?
Any other thoughts on this last question? Okay. So there is an emerging umbrella organization. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you very much for sharing. It's kind of, what was it? Every little thing matters. And I appreciated personally how the tradition of the faith weaves into the action of the faith. Just thank you all very much. Okay.
And next week, the Pride team is bringing a speaker on gender affirming care. So we'll see you next week.